For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia rise?
Mr. Speaker, I ask to address the House for 1 minute for the purpose of inquiring about next week's schedule.
The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute without objection.
I thank the Speaker, and I yield to the gentleman from Maryland, the Majority Leader, for the purpose of announcing next week's schedule.
I thank my friend for yielding. I'm glad that I'm here for him to yield too. On Monday, the House will meet at 12:30 p.m. for morning hour and 2 p.m. for legislative business. On Tuesday, the House will meet at 10:30 a.m. for morning hour business and 12 p.m. for legislative business. On Wednesday, the House will meet at 10 a.m. for legislative business. On Thursday and Friday, no votes are expected due to the House Republican issue conference. We will consider several bills under suspension of the rules. The complete list of suspension bills will be announced by close of business tomorrow. We also expect to consider the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009. We anticipate as well the Senate taking action on the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act, and if they do, our hope is to consider the legislation as early as next week. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. Mr. Speaker, as the gentleman knows, the Democrat congressional stimulus bill will add nearly $1 trillion to the nation's debt. That is roughly $2,700 in additional debt for every man, woman, and child in the United States. Republicans are hopeful, Mr. Speaker, that this stimulus bill will be considered openly so as to ensure there is no waste of taxpayer dollars. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, the public has not been given an extra day to review the congressional Democratic proposal prior to committee consideration. Further, committees are rushing as we speak to consider their respective portions of the bill, completing markups in a single day. And Mr. Speaker, as has been announced, we are going to be hastily considering the bill next week. And I would ask the gentleman from Maryland, will all members and the American people be given 48 hours to review the committee reports prior to a vote next week as the House rules dictate?
Will the gentleman yield?
I yield.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. First, let me say I appreciate the gentleman's comments. Clearly, we have come into this Congress with an economy in crisis. That economy, very frankly, was not affected by anything the Democrats did over the last 2 years because on economic policy, of course, we couldn't pass anything either through the Senate or the President's veto. So the economic crisis that confronts us, we believe, is the result of 8 years of, in some respects, fiscal irresponsibility and economic irresponsibility, and taking the referees off the field and with no regulation, I tell my friend. Having said that, I continue to believe the gentleman's point is a good point, a point with which I agree. It is my hope that the committee markups will be completed tonight, maybe early this morning. As you know, the Appropriations Committee marked up yesterday, had a full markup, adopted 6 Republican amendments and a number of Democratic amendments. I don't know what the amendment status is in Energy and Commerce or Ways and Means, but I expect all those markups to be completed either late tonight. I hope, it is my hope that once those markups are complete, that by tomorrow night we will post the results on the web, and that they will be available 48 hours, but either tonight or Friday night or Saturday, so that we'll have 4 days to review those items. But I want to reiterate my hope and my expectation, to state it even more strongly, that you, the minority members, country, majority members will have 48 hours to review the product that is reported out of the committee after their markups. So I yield back.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the gentleman for his response. I appreciate the spirit in which he responds to the inquiry, and will set aside the supposition that perhaps we have to rush because of some policies that were in place over the last 8 years, and would point out to the gentleman that, again, it is his party that has served in the majority of the last 2 years, building up to the current situation that we are in. But I would ask the gentleman, specifically, does he know what day the actual stimulus bill will be considered on the floor of this House?
If the gentleman will yield?
I yield.
My expectation it will be Wednesday.
Wednesday. Thank the gentleman. Mr. Speaker, President Obama has actively solicited Republican ideas to be included in his stimulus package. I would like to ask the gentleman from Maryland, I yield to him to respond to the fact and the question of will congressional Democrats allow all ideas to be considered as amendments on the House floor without restriction? And I yield.
I thank the gentleman. As the gentleman knows, a very large portion of this bill will be tax cuts. Almost half of this bill is going to be tax cuts for working Americans and for business. As the gentleman knows, as a member of the Ways and Means Committee, rarely, if ever, I'm not sure that I can remember a Ways and Means tax bill that came to the floor as an open rule, which is what the gentleman suggests, so that I would be, you would be shocked if I said, yes, that's the way the bill is going to come to the floor, because your bills never come to the floor that way, whether they're Democratic chairs or Republican chairs. So my expectation is that it will not come as an open rule, but I do not want to prescribe right now or prescribe right now exactly I have not talked to the chair of the Rules Committee, nor have the markups been complete, so that I don't want to prejudge what the rule will be. But I certainly understand the gentleman's proposition that alternatives, you would like alternatives considered, perhaps not to the tax provision. I don't know your particular position. I do know the position of the Republican leadership of the Ways and Means Committee historically, and the Democratic leadership of the Ways and Means Committee historically. There's been bipartisan agreement that once a tax bill is forged, amending it on the floor becomes very complicated, very risky. I yield back.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker, and I would just respond by saying that perhaps because of the expedited nature of the process, given the severity of the crisis, that we would have an opportunity to change that tradition and open up Ways and Means bills. But I accept the gentleman's response, although I may not agree with the outcome. Mr. Speaker, President Obama has asked that 40% of the stimulus bill be reserved for tax relief. Republicans agree on the need for fast-acting tax relief for families and small businesses. Unfortunately, it seems the Democrat majority in its proposal includes far less tax relief than what President Obama requested. Some estimates say there is only 10% tax cuts. The estimates that I have had that seem reasonable and accurate is that there is only 33% of this bill, proposed bill, that includes tax cuts, and the rest, the 66%, just pure government spending. I'd also note that the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office reported that less than half of the spending on infrastructure in the Congressional Democrat proposal will be spent by the end of 2010. That hardly seems stimulative. By contrast, Mr. Speaker, our position would be tax cuts can have an immediate impact. So I'd like to ask the gentleman from Maryland, the Majority Leader, will Democrats allow amendments to be considered for a vote on the floor that increase the tax relief in this bill as President Obama has requested? And I yield.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. I'm not sure that President Obama has requested specifically what you suggest he requested. He did say that he wanted a very significant portion of this bill to be tax cuts for working Americans. He promised that in his campaign. He promised that he was going to give 95% of taxpayers in America a tax cut. This bill will do that. I'm not sure of the exact percentage, but I think probably between 30 and 40%. You're correct in that approximate range. I think that, as I've said before, and maybe being redundant, as you know, the practice is once your committee forges, and you're a member of the Ways and Means Committee, we appropriators sometimes felt constrained by this rule that your committee had, but nevertheless, your committee has generally felt that tax provisions are very complicated, need to be worked on carefully, and once proposed, should be voted either up or down. I don't think that your representation that President Obama is saying that it ought to be amended on the floor is necessarily accurate, I tell my friend, but he does want, and we will have, and you will have the opportunity, and every member of this House will have an opportunity to vote for a tax cut for 95% of the tax-paying public, not only in terms of individuals, but also significant tax cuts for those in business to try to make sure that they can be more successful, that they can have an increased investment tax credit, and that they can have a look-back provision for applying to profits that they made in the past, significant losses that are occurring now. The reason for that, obviously, is to try to keep them in business, keep those jobs able to remain with those businesses, and so that I can tell the gentleman that he's going to have a very significant tax cut for the American taxpaying public to vote for or against.
I thank the gentleman, and it's my understanding that the President has said he expects Washington to act differently, that we should and owe it to the public to have an open and transparent process, up or down votes in the light of day. That's simply our request, Mr. Speaker, that we be given an opportunity to propose and vote on our tax relief. Obviously, there are differences in what type of tax relief are appropriate in terms of a stimulus bill, and that being the spirit of my question. Mr. Speaker, the House just voted to stop the administration from spending another $350 billion in bailout funds. However, I'd like to clarify the outcome of that vote for the people that elect us. Last week, the Senate voted to allow the additional $350 billion to be spent. Therefore, the House and Senate are in disagreement about whether the $350 billion should be spent or not under the TARP program. So I'd like to clarify, even though the House voted against the $350 billion, the administration will still be allowed to spend that money. And I'd ask the gentleman, is that correct? And I yield.
That is correct.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Essentially, if I might clarify for our members and their constituents, obviously the vote today was symbolic, and everybody knew it was symbolic. Symbolic to the extent that the Senate voted last week, as the gentleman pointed out, to defeat a motion or a resolution of disapproval. Under the statute that was passed by this House and Senate and signed by President Bush, the process is that those funds are now available for expenditure because the House and Senate did not pass resolutions of disapproval. Very frankly, President Bush had indicated he would, if we'd done this earlier, would have probably vetoed such a resolution. I want to say to my friend that in a bipartisan way, President Bush sent this request to the Congress. He indicated he sent it to the Congress at the request of President Obama. They both agreed that this request was necessary. So our two leaders, elected in 2000, 2004, and 2008, have said that given the crisis that confronts us, they believe that this money is absolutely essential if they are to have the ability to stabilize the economy. Secretary Colson believed that was necessary, who was the Secretary of Treasury under Secretary Bush. Secretary Geithner, who was just confirmed by the Senate, has said he believes that is necessary. So I say to my friend that the legislation passed, signed by President Bush, provided for a process which said that if either House voted against a motion for disapproval, the money would go forward. And as the gentleman has pointed out, in light of the Senate action, the money will, in fact, be available to President Obama and Secretary Geithner to try to continue to stabilize this economy, which is in such crisis.
I thank the gentleman. Mr. Speaker, yesterday the House passed a bill to provide further restrictions on this next $350 billion that, as the gentleman points out, the Senate has approved. Yet it is my understanding that the Senate has no intention of taking the House bill that was passed up yesterday. So I'd like to ask the gentleman Do you expect the bailout restrictions as passed by the House yesterday to become law?
I would hope they would. I voted for it. I believe that they were a response to what we have seen is a lack of transparency, a lack of as much accountability as the taxpayer has a right to expect, and also the failure of the TARP funds already approved to help average people around this country who are faced with losing their homes, having their mortgages foreclosed on. The legislation that we passed yesterday in a bipartisan vote, as you know, was legislation which said we ought to have greater accountability, greater transparency so the American public knows how their money is being spent, and also that we need to have a greater focus on Main Street, not exclusively on Wall Street. I think the American public are for that legislation. I would hope the Senate would pass it. Very frankly, I will tell my friend, one of the problems that it has in the Senate is that there are a large number of members in your party, I believe, who are not for money being diverted to mortgage relief. I disagree with that as a policy, but the issue is whether they can get 60 votes to take it up. I tell the gentleman I'm hopeful that they will. In addition, as I said on this floor in response to Congresswoman Fox, it is my understanding that Chairman Frank and President Obama have had discussions, and that President Obama believes the conditions and transparency and focus on helping people whose mortgages are at risk is something that his administration is going to follow, whether or not that legislation is passed into law. Now, yield back.
Thank you. I thank the gentleman. Mr. Speaker, I'd just like to say in closing that I would hope that the standard of transparency and openness that should be applied to the expenditure of the TARP monies can be applied to the conduct of the proceedings of this House over the next 2 years during the 111th Congress. I think we owe it to the American people. We owe it to the American people to know what the members that they elect are doing, what they're voting on, is why I again say to the gentleman, I hope that the proceedings next week on this unprecedented amount of money in the bill that is currently being marked up, this unprecedented amount can come to this floor in the most open, transparent way possible, giving the minority, the Republicans, and this side of the aisle the ability to make their proposals known, to have votes on those ideas, because after all, that is the spirit in which we would like to work, not only with the gentleman and his party, but certainly with the new president. Mr. Speaker, I thank the gentleman very much and yield back my time.
Mr. Speaker.
For what purposes does the gentleman from Maryland rise?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that when the House adjourns today, it adjourn to meet at noon tomorrow, and further when the House adjourns on that day, it adjourn to meet at 12:30 p.m. on Monday next for morning hour debate.
Without objection, so ordered.